Hey guys, Brown Bear here, all the way from Ireland. I thought I'd bring you a video today. Hopefully it's useful around my settings really in DCS World relating to VR. I'm a 5K plus user, Pimax 5K plus user, and there's a lot of guides out there on the internet around what settings do what and how to kind of fine tune your system. But there's nothing really specifically related to a particular headset. So in my case, this is a Pimax 5K plus, and this would be useful for anyone out there who has a wide field of view headset. So in this video, I'm going to show you my settings, why I use them there, the performance I get, and hopefully you find this useful. Go into general. You can see I'm obviously using the latest firmware and PiTool version. Pimax VR Home I always leave off because it just eats up resources, and although it's not much, it does affect your VR performance, so best to leave that off. Refresh rate is very important, and a lot of people forget that it's actually linked to your latency, and which affects your frames and not stutters, but kind of your lag and stuff like that. So I play at 90 Hz. I find it's a good sweet spot between performance and clarity. Particularly, this isn't really noticeable in the cockpit itself, but particularly if you're doing external views or flybys in particular, which everyone's partial to, including myself. So if you hit a flyby at 64 Hz or 72 Hz, it's a bit blurry. It's like you have motion blur on max or something. But on 90 Hz and upwards, it gets a lot clearer. And I don't have a system that can handle 120 Hz or 144. I don't think anyone does, really. So I leave it on 90 Hz and just find it's a good sweet spot. In terms of the field of view, I use normal field of view, which in Pimax terms is about 150 degrees, I believe. My render quality is set to the default of 1. Fixed foveated rendering I leave at close, which means off. Compatible with parallel reprojections is no longer needed for DCS World. I'm using the Open Beta version, by the way, so that kind of saves a few frames since they did that. Smart smoothing, which is I believe it's like asynchronous warp for Oculus. I leave it off, and the reason I leave it off is because I can get the rule of thumb is if you can get half the frames per second of your Hertz output, then you are laughing. And obviously, if you can maintain plus 5 to 6 frames per second, so your lowest point is kind of like 40, 49, 50 frames per second if you're running on a 90 Hertz headset, then you don't need this on. Always best to kind of test it out first and do a worst case scenario, so load everything up, clutter an airfield or a carrier, and run the test and see if it can maintain that FPS, and if it can, then you don't need it. So I leave it off and have a very, very smooth performance. Hidden area mask, I believe this actually refers to the rendering of objects outside of your field of vision in the headset. So I leave this ticked because I don't want that eating up any additional resources, and that's it really. So the rest is just kind of to your taste. So let's get into DCS World, and I'm going to show you my settings. So you can see here, so textures high. I would never leave them anywhere else. It just doesn't look good. Terrain textures, you can do high or low. There's about 1 to 1.5 frames per second in the difference, so you're better off just leaving it where it is. Civilian traffic is an absolute nightmare and kills performance, as everyone will tell you, so I leave it off. Water, low. I think low looks actually the most realistic, but I mean that might just be me. I find medium and high, it looks a bit more or a bit too cartoony for me, so I just leave it on low, and it does help performance a little bit. It doesn't have a huge impact. You're talking a couple of frames a second. Visibility range is a huge one. and it affects the performance massively. Probably about a 9 to 10 frames per second difference for me between medium and high. I leave it on high purely because when I'm in VR and I like to see in the distance if I'm on a high altitude. It doesn't help with spotting. You can leave it on medium and spot the same, have the same capability of spotting planes in a dogfight, for example. So it doesn't affect that. Heat blur, do yourself a favor and just leave it off in VR. You won't see it unless you're running a really high refresh rate. HMD, such as obviously a Pimax like in 120 or 144 hertz, or the new Pimax Supers in 180 hertz. I don't think anyone's going to be doing that, let's be honest. Shadows, a lot of people say low is the kind of go-to for VR, but personally I find flat only is very similar and provides a much needed boost in frames per second. I usually get about 5 to 6 in the difference between flat only and low, so I'll welcome that. Aspect ratio, resolution, and monitors, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter if you're playing this on a 2K screen like myself, and you're using your Pimax headset. It doesn't matter what resolution you set this at, it's not really going to affect performance in DCS. What I will say to you is, I'm setting a bad example here. I'm running DCS World in a window mode. Set it to full screen. It does give you about a frame or two extra, because it doesn't have to render your desktop in the background. The res of cockpit displays, 1024. I leave this at just purely because it's my preference around clarity, and I just think this works best for me. But 1024 every frame will hit your performance by a few frames, and I believe this does affect mirrors as well. So if you want that bit of extra juice that in something that you're not going to notice too much, leave it at 1024. And what that means basically is it doesn't have to if the system's under pressure and it can't get that frame out at 1024, it will update it at something else, obviously lower. And generally I turn my mirrors off when I'm in the cockpit anyway, so just right click on your mirrors and they'll get them out of the way, and it gives you an extra few frames boost. MSAA, cannot leave it off in VR unless you're very lucky, but for me, if I leave it off, it just makes the ground look like it's made of glitter, and I can't deal with that. So I have 2 small kids. I see enough glitter to save, to last me a lifetime. So I leave it on 2x. I'd love to run it on 4x if you can do, and you have a bit of headroom with your GPU. I only have 2080 Super, so it's 8 gig of RAM. But if you have something else with 11 gig of RAM or more, by all means put this to 4x if you can handle it, and you will see a huge difference. The rest of the settings I'm not really going to go into on this side, so depth of field, lens, blah blah blah. Just don't turn them on. That's SSAA and SSLR, I turn these on my monitor just to test them in non-VR mode, and they had such a massive impact in performance. With everything maxed out, I was getting 55 frames per second. With SSA on 2 and SSLR on, I got 15. So and I'm running an i5 9600 KF at 5.1 gigahertz. I have 32 gigs of Corsair Dominator RAM at 3200 megahertz. So my system isn't half bad. It's not a monster by any means, but it does kill performance, guys. Clutter and grass, moving on, doesn't have any real impact. It used to, it doesn't anymore. So I leave that maxed out. Trees visibility does have a bit of an impact, and this is my preference. 80%, 75-80% I find is a good sweet spot to have some nice eye candy, but the performance as well. If you put it up to 100, it's just going to make trees, in the distance, a little bit more visible, and it'll populate those nearby forests a bit more densely. But it's not, you're not going to notice it, when you're flying low, fast through valleys, or especially if you're a pie in the sky doing, a combat air patrol or a strike mission. Your eyes are focused elsewhere. Preload radius, if you have plenty of RAM and a fast an SSD or an NVMe, and just on that note, you shouldn't be running DCS on a spinning disk unless you absolutely have to. And if you do have to, choose an SSHD, so a hybrid spinning disk with a bit of cache on it. But ideally you'd want to be running this on an SSD or an NVMe drive. So max this out if you can. It does lengthen load times, but it reduces stutters in game greatly. Chimney smoke density, I don't find this has a huge impact, and I don't really find it makes much of a difference either, so I just leave it at 2. Gamma is personal preference, but for me in Pimax I find 1.7 works best. I have seen some guys use 1.4 just because the Pimax displays are so bright and kind of washed out. But 1.7 works best for me. Anisotropic filtering at 4x is what I use, but you can't really turn this off in VR, and the reason for that is if you're doing a mid-air refuel and you're in an F-16 for example, and you're coming up under a KC-135, you need to see the lights. If anisotropic filtering is off, you won't be able to see those lights, or you'll have a very hard time doing so. So for light effects and that kind of thing, you'd want at least a 4x minimum. I don't see a huge difference between 4x and 16x. You can see a few cracks in the runway or the taxiway a bit further in the distance, but that's really it. Doesn't make a huge difference, and it does have a small impact on your GPU load. Not much in terms of frames per second, but in terms of your GPU, it will eat the resources, so why not free them up. Terrain object shadows is another big one for me. I got about a 13 or 14 frames per second boost between flat only and off, which I was very surprised at, and a big newie and Eagle Dynamics actually gave me that tip, and it literally, that was the difference for me between running brain warp or asynchronous time warp, whatever you call it in Oculus World. That was the difference between me turning that on or off, and so massive difference. Global cockpit illumination, it's nice if you can turn it on. I mean, it adds this kind of this cool lighting effect and kind of shadowy kind of effects to the cockpit, but it does have an impact on performance. You're probably talking around 4 or 5 FPS, so I tend to leave it off. Rain droplets is a huge one. You're talking 9 to 10. Yeah, so it looks great, but it is an FPS killer. I'm using a mod, a rain droplet mod, which I will put the link in the description to the video, but you can find on DCS User Files, and it's done wonders. So it actually adds more rain in the distance, keeps the raindrops on the canopy, but they're kind of not as, I don't know how he did it. It's not as detailed, but it still looks pretty cool, and there's no real performance hit, so it's brilliant. I love it. Moving on to kind of VR, I don't think it's actually here because I'm running the game. It's not. So you'll see here usually pixel density or PD. For Pimax, you can run a 1.0 and then in Steam VR. So if we go down here, and I'll show you what I'm currently running. So click on that tool, settings, video, per application settings. You can see DCS is loaded here. DCS will only show here if you have the game currently running. So custom multiplier set at 129%. That's what I'm currently running. Just ignore what the mouse is doing, guys. I had to record this over this part of the video. But basically, yeah, custom multiplier 129%. Basically what this does is, so if the white line they see there is the recommended bar, which is generally set at 100%, but by bringing that up, what it does is it forces Steam VR to render additional pixels into your image in an attempt to improve clarity. It does improve clarity, absolutely, and it does affect performance, but it's not as CPU intensive as the DCS pixel density. So what I recommend you do is you put your, if you're having issues running your running DCS with frames per second, and you have an issue with performance or clarity, bring your pixel density in DCS down, so down to 0.7 maybe for starters, and then bring your custom multiplier in Steam up to say 130%. So that should give you roughly a 1-to-1 ratio, and you'll notice a great improved performance and clarity. The one thing I will say is it does affect spotting, because what the Steam custom resolution multiplier is doing is matching extra additional pixels into the image, so it can affect spotting in DCS, so just bear that in mind. Motion smoothing, basically what motion smoothing does is it looks at frames, the last 2 frames delivered in the game, and in an attempt to predict if the game is going to drop a frame. And what it does is actually extrapolates a new frame into that, and potentially smoothing out the overall gameplay experience and image. Legacy reprojection mode is basically very similar to motion smoothing, except it only works on head rotation. So you may see an improvement in performance if you turn motion smoothing on and reprojection mode on. I've heard some people reporting 10 to 15 frames per second boost with the 2 of them on, but for me, I leave them off. So this next section, guys, I'm going to show you basically the kind of mission I'm running here. This is a very detailed mission, not purposely made for the sake of this, but it's I used it anyway just as a good baseline because it's a very detailed mission. As you can see, it's very overcast, it's raining. The airfield I'm using is actually a mod, which I'll put a link in the description too, but the airfield is littered with planes, both high polygon Hornets and A-10s and F-16Cs and the Block 50s and tankers, AWACS, the whole lot. Also has fuel trucks and a few helicopters, a couple of infantry running around, Hummers and the like. So it's a detailed scene, and I purposely did this to tax the system to show you, as well, and use this to show you the frames that I'm getting. So you can see there that I am getting 49-50 frames per second. That's with recording software running, a couple of monitors, windowed mode, which is obviously not best. Best performance, you're only talking probably a frame or 2 at most, but if you want that extra kick, just run DCS in full screen mode when you have your headset on, and it does provide a little bit of a boost because it doesn't have to render your desktop in the background. But that's it. I mean, you can see there an FPS monitor there as well. No lies there, guys. You can see the averages, the mins, the lows, the 0.1 lows, the 1% lows, all sorts. Currently I'm GPU bottlenecked in this scene. As you can see, I'm running, as I said, a 2080 Super, so it's only 8 gig of RAM, and when I start bumping up stuff like MSAA, so for example, if I have that currently on 2x, if I was to put that on 4x, I'd see a considerable drop on my frames, just because I'm already maxed out on my GPU, so I don't have the headroom. But if you have a better card, as I said earlier on in the video, by all means, turn up some of those settings, turn up the eye candy, and you could probably see the same performance as me, if not better. So look, guys, I hope this video was useful. If you like it, please like, subscribe, hit the bell. There'll be more content on the way, and I hope to have some unboxings and reviews coming up. Unboxing of a WinWing Super Taurus coming up soon, hopefully, when I get my hands on that. There'll be an unboxing of a Monster Tech mount, the long mount for my new WinWing Super Libra stick that I absolutely love. There'll also be a couple of giveaways. I have a Pimax comfort kit to give away, brand new, in the plastic, still unused. So if you're interested, it's only 40 quid, but very, very useful for someone with a Pimax headset. If you're still on the standard foam, that's very comfortable. And I'll also give away potentially my Cytec X52 Pro throttle and stick. So stay tuned. Obviously, for those giveaways, you need to be subscribed, guys. So please do try like, subscribe, and help the channel out. If you don't like the video for whatever reason, do dislike it. I encourage it. But please just do me a favor and leave a comment in the comments box as to why you don't. So potentially just give me a bit of a constructive criticism and help the channel as I continue on this journey. Thanks, guys. Stay safe.